so different because that's what's up with me.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our March Kohn Lecture. My name is Suchi, and this year I'm the Kohn Lecture Coordinator to the Speaking Fellows. We're so glad to see you all here. First up, we have Willow and Sarina. Willow is a junior majoring in environmental studies and political science. Sarina is also a junior majoring in finance and economics. So give them a warm welcome.
We're new with these microphones. Can everyone hear us okay? Yeah. Thumbs up in the back? Okay, awesome. So today, me and Sarina are presenting on From Gossiping to Professional Connections, How Talking Can Level Up Your Career. So I'm Willow.
I'm Sarina.
And we are so excited that you guys all came. And we're really excited to give our first ever Kohn Lecture. So when we were first thinking about our Kohn Lecture topics, we thought of a lot of different options, but we sort of came to this similar idea that we've always loved chatting with each other. We were major gossipers in high school. We always loved being in the know. We're reformed now. We are reformed now. But we always enjoyed getting to know people, making social connections. But we never thought that it had a professional application. We thought, oh, okay, it helps us make friends easier. We can talk to strangers a little bit better. But how is this going to help us in our professional career? And so once we got to college, we used our social personalities to branch out, to make new friends, and we eventually found our way into the Speaking Fellows. And now we have this really newfound appreciation for the power of public speaking and how it's important both in your personal, your academic, and your professional life. So tonight we will be diving into the ways in which being a confident public speaker can be beneficial in those personal, academic, and professional settings. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sarina to discuss what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, so we're going to start by talking about how to harness the power of speech as a student at the U of R. So really combining those professional and academic together and incorporating the personal aspect of being in college as well. Next, then we're going to go into how these experiences can actually translate into a useful skill set to actually go and apply to jobs, specifically focusing on networking and interviews. And finally, we're going to go and explore the ways in which being a confident speaker actually extends past just getting the job and can teach you how to be a good coworker and continue to be someone that people actually want to spend time with when working 40 hours a week.
Awesome. So our first section we're going to be talking about is specifically how being a confident public speaker can benefit you here in your 4 years at the U of R through harnessing the power of speech. So me and Sarina consider ourselves to be lifetime yappers. We loved yapping as children and we love yapping here. We do it and we consider ourselves professional yappers as well. And so we're first going to talk about building personal connections and how being a confident public speaker can help you with maybe potentially mundane social interactions, but over time they can really help you build confidence as a speaker. So our first example is making friends. College, a lot of the times, is the first time that you're sort of plopped into a completely new social experience. From high school and your hometown, you may have had all of the same friends in high school, but now you're surrounded by a completely new set of human beings, and being confident in sort of going up to someone, like I did with Sarina on one of our first days here at the U of R, and just asking where you're from and what you like to do can be a great way to build your confidence as a public speaker. Additionally, just general public interactions. Being at college for the first time, you might have to grocery shop and ask a staff worker where the butter is. You might have to go to the IT desk and interact with student employees. Even just talking to your Uber driver can seem like a really scary experience for the first time. And so there's a lot of small public interactions, but building up your confidence just through sort of those small everyday conversations can be a great way to become a more confident public speaker. Additionally, group projects are another sort of academic format in which being the first person to take the leap of faith to reach out to your group members can be really scary. Maybe in high school you always did your group projects with your best friends and you just kind of like tap them on the shoulder and go, "You need to start this, it's due tomorrow." But in college, there's a lot of more new people, and so it can be really scary to be the first one to reach out and be like, "Hey, we need to start this project." But if you feel confident, then you can be the one to really get that ball. Additionally, club involvement is huge here at the U of R. So many U of R undergrads are involved in at least one club or extracurricular. So being confident, being involved in a club is awesome because you get to make friends, but it's also great for peer leadership. So whether you're making connections and eventually you might want to be on the executive board, you might have to make an e-board speech, and eventually, let's say that next year you are on the e-board, you might have to be involved with delegating tasks and handling conflict, and being a confident public speaker is a great way to be able to feel confident in the ways that you are interacting with your peers in the leadership setting.
Yeah, absolutely. Another great way to expand your leadership while on campus is working under a professor, whether that be as a teacher's assistant, workshop leader, or even in research. Building those relationships within academia, especially early on in your college career, are amazing stepping stones to be the first step to a job or mentorship, the first person you're going to reach out to when you do need that letter of recommendation. Effectively communicating within your area of expertise on campus is a great way to kind of get yourself known in the field to start off. For example, when I first came to the University of Rochester, I took an Introduction to Economics course my first semester here. I never had any econ experience except early into high school, and I really liked the class and wanted to see if this was something I wanted to get a little bit more involved in. I decided that a great way to do this would be to start going to my professor's office hours. I went to his office hours and we started chatting. He got to know me, I got to know him, and I just thought he was a great person to get to know and really friendly, and so I continued going. I was actually able to have the same professor again for a second semester and continued to get to know him. So when teacher's assistant applications came out in the spring for the following year, I was the first person to raise my hand, jump on board, and be like, I want to work for you. Because of this, because of how well he knew me, it was really easy to kind of get through the application process, because not only did he know that I have the grades and skills to be able to do so, but that I was passionate about it and would actually put in the time to be able to help students who were in the same boat as me just a year ago. I was able to get this teaching assistant position and was actually able to continue teaching assistant for him the next semester as well for a second class. And even now, although I haven't taken a class with him in 2 years, we still maintain a close relationship, and I continue to stop by office hours and send emails. And actually, when I needed a letter of recommendation to apply to the Speaking Fellows, he was the first person I turned to.
Awesome. And so Sarina's example is one of a maybe more traditional path of building rapport with your professors, getting to know them, going to their office hours, becoming a TA, and then eventually a letter of recommendation. I had a slightly different story for the exact same letter of recommendation for the Speaking Fellows. So my recommender was my Writing 105 professor. So he was only teaching one class, but as we know, Writing 105 is one of the only class required by undergrads. And so in my experience, and maybe yours too, a lot of the students in my class were sort of unengaged. They didn't have the greatest participation or attendance records, I know. And so I was really interested in the topic. I'm an environmental studies major, and it was a garbage writing class, so bit of an odd topic, but I had fun. And so I showed up to class every day. I was engaged, ready to participate and ask questions. And I wasn't able to go to office hours very often because I had a class conflict, but the 1 or 2 times that I did go really helped me build some rapport with my professor. And so by the end of the semester, and when it came time to ask for a letter of recommendation for the Speaking Fellows, even though I didn't have as formal of sort of a partnership with this professor, I still felt comfortable enough with him that I was able to ask him for that letter of recommendation, and we both ended up in the same spot, speaking here in front of you today. And so there are lots of ways to build personal rapport with your professors.
Overall, maintaining those connections that you make in college really helps kickstart that professional network, and is really amazing to have this as a stepping stone when starting out in your career. Actually, according to the Harvard Business Review, 85% of jobs are never posted publicly because they're actually filled internally through personal connections or employee referrals, or even sometimes internal hiring. Growing this professional network right out of college is obviously crucial, but it's never too early to start, and a great time is here in a tight-knit community at U of R. But we know that these kind of more chill networking opportunities are some of the hardest forms of public speaking, in our opinion. They tend to be more informal and unstructured. You don't really know the best way to go about it, but don't worry, because we have some tips and tricks on how to combat the situation. The first thing when you're getting yourself into networking for the first time is to really focus on creating an elevator pitch for yourself. What is an elevator pitch, you might ask? It's a good 90-second-ish or so way of just saying, this is what you need to know about me and why I would be a good fit for whatever it is that the person's involved with. And the most important thing about an elevator pitch is truly looking at your audience. Knowing that depending on the person you're speaking to, you're gonna wanna cater your pitch to be different. If you're looking into going into research versus going into corporate America, these are gonna be two very different spiels about yourself. If you're going to look at a nonprofit versus a fashion company, you probably have different experiences on your resume that you're gonna wanna pull to get to both of these positions. Every employer or just general connection has something special about themselves, so you wanna find out what's special about you that can help connect with them. And most importantly about networking is actually keeping these connections alive. And a great place to do so is LinkedIn. We've all heard of it, you either love it or you hate it, but at the end of the day, it's a great place for overall networking because it's just the most commonly used one. A good way to start on LinkedIn is to kind of just post about things that you're working on, maybe the classes you're part of, the job you have on campus, but a good way to keep in the know with your connections is to continue posting so they know what you're up to in a professional setting and what new skill sets you've developed that can help them out in the future. You really need to work on keeping these connections alive though, whether that is just replying to their LinkedIn post or shooting them an email every couple of months to bond over a shared experience that you might have, or ask them how their latest project is going, because the last thing you want is to have an amazing conversation with someone at a networking event and then realize, oh, I actually want to ask them something 2 years down the line, but they have no idea who you are because you didn't keep up with them. Additionally, another great resource that we have through U of R is the Meliora Collective. It's like LinkedIn, but for U of R students, and it's a great way to connect undergrads with alums from U of R. The Meliora Collective also partakes in a mentorship program, which I'm currently a part of, and it's an amazing way to kind of get connected with someone specifically in your field who has experiences that are relevant to you, and can actually show you how the skills that they took out of U of R actually helped them in a professional setting. Here, if you reach out to people on the Meliora Collective, they're probably more likely to respond to you than just cold messaging or emailing someone that has no idea who you are, but these are all amazing ways to kind of start building your network and keeping those connections alive.
Amazing. And going off of that, the Meliora Collective is a great way to sort of build out your professional network, and the Green Center, which is the career office here on campus, is another great avenue to attend networking events right here on campus. So one story that I want to share is a networking event that I went to for careers in public service. So as an underclassman, I was really nervous about going to networking events. I don't really need a job, who cares, I have more time here. And then I became a junior and decided maybe it was a good idea to start building up my professional network. And so at this networking event, there were employees that were at the university working for different companies throughout Rochester that were partnering with the U of R to provide internships to students. And so I was interested in these internships and thought it might be a good opportunity. So I went to the networking event, I met with a couple different employees, and I eventually, 2 weeks later, once I had applied to those internships, I get an email that rolls into my inbox, and oh ho ho ho, it was actually someone that I had talked to at the networking event wanting to schedule an interview. So during that interview, she brought up the fact that she remembered me, and we were able to build a little bit more of a rapport, especially over a Zoom interview, and eventually the job. So that was a great way that the Green Center was able to help connect me with a professional connection that actually led to a summer internship gig. So now we're going to transition into interviews. And so summer internships are, I'm sure, top of mind. We're either applied, thinking about applying, or we're maybe a little bit late and we're going to apply in the next couple of weeks. But summer internships are top of mind for a lot of college students. However, they're really scary a lot of the times because a lot of them can be very competitive. All of the college students have these 8 weeks open and they're all competing for the same internship opportunities. And it can also be really difficult, as I just mentioned, when you're applying to internships. I was applying to one in Rochester, and that was a Zoom interview. But if you're applying across the country, there's no way you can go to a bunch of different cities to do in-person interviews. So when you have a Zoom interview, you can't, shake a person's hand, look them in the eye, and really, show them your personal charisma in person. And so the words that are coming out of your mouth become doubly important to make sure that you are communicating your message in a clear and concise way. Another amazing opportunity to build your professional repertoire are through on-campus jobs. And so here at the U of R, where we have sort of a more small and tight-knit community, your professors, people that you're interacting with through different clubs and extracurriculars, might be people that you end up working for. And so you're networking every day. And so a story I would like to share is about my current on-campus job in the sustainability office. So as a first year, I was involved in a first-year sustainability program called EcoReps, and during that year, the head of the sustainability office was in the classroom every so often helping us with different projects. So throughout that year, she got to know my name, who I was as a student, that I was passionate about sustainability. That next year, I was looking for an on-campus job. I saw that the sustainability office was hiring, and I thought, maybe she'll remember who I am. And during our interview, she knew exactly who I was, what I was involved in, the fact that I was passionate and had on-campus experience, and I was one of the first people that she hired, and I've been working ever since. And so really building your professional network, even in an on-campus and academic space, can really help you to get those new experiences. And finally, we're not quite there yet, but a lot of us, whether we're juniors or seniors or just really stressed out sophomores, might be thinking about post-grad jobs. And so these can seem really, really scary. They're, higher paying jobs than we've ever had. We might be in them for a year, 2, 3 years, which is like as long as we've been college students. It's really scary to think about interviewing, about networking for these sorts of experiences. However, all of the things that you've done here at the U of R, whether that's going to networking events through the Green Center, interviewing for all of your different on-campus jobs and summer internships, are a completely relevant experience to going into the post-grad world. The public speaking skills that you've acquired here at the U of R, would be super relevant as you're thinking about transitioning into your early career opportunities.
Yeah, and as Will mentioned, a lot of people do get post-grad jobs through a new cycle of applications and interviews where then you could take this experience that you had and push it to this new application process, but a lot of other people get these post-grad jobs through return offers. A big thing with return offers is you already went and you aced that interview one time, you know you can do it, but now you've been hired into this internship in the first place, you've impressed your boss all summer. You have the technical skills, but however, return offers are only going to be given to the people that the company actually wants to work with them for longer than 8 to 10 weeks. So, although it can be often stereotyped in a negative light, here we're striving to be personality hires. Feeling confident in your hard skills is truly the first step to becoming a well-rounded employee, but mastering the soft skills is when you can truly have it all. These soft skills are the things that are much harder to learn at the end of the day, but they're instead cultivated through over time and require a lot of your energy, effort, and a lot of really pointed intention to figure out. It's truly a valued trait amongst anyone, but especially your boss, colleagues, coworkers, anyone you're working with. And one of these big soft skills that truly is the most emphasized is a strong foundation in public speaking. Your quality of life at the workplace is definitely going to increase when you like the people you work with. Spending 40 hours a week with someone who you don't like isn't something anyone wants to do. You probably at least want to be acquaintances, if not casual friends. So being able to actually network among colleagues and older people, mentors in a summer internship to secure that return offer is something that's really important. Personality is really relevant in those internal settings, and overall is just as important in those technical skills, but especially when you're looking at public-facing roles.
Sorry. I have an auto translator that sometimes pops up at random moments. And so Sarina is going into banking, which is maybe a more sort of client-based role, but I'm looking to go into public service where I'm going to be talking to people hopefully every day. New job, please hire me. And so I had a little bit of experience with this last summer. I worked with an environmental advocacy nonprofit group where I was doing education and engagement for the whole summer. And so I had the technical skills. It was like be able to write well, be able to have Google Suite knowledge. And so I'm sure that every other resume looked and had those same skills. And so during my interview, they really stressed the fact that they wanted someone that fit into their brand ethos, that was positive and upbeat and was able to connect with volunteers from across the nation on weekly Zoom climate advocacy training calls. And so I really enjoyed that experience. And at the end of the summer, during my intern evaluation, they made sure to write down that they really appreciated that I was able to connect over Zoom with all of these volunteers from like as young as 15 to as old as like 65. And so that was a role that really showed me that yes, I did have the technical skills, but it was almost more important that I had the personality that they were looking for. And so we've just gone over a ton of ways that being a confident speaker is useful in getting a job and being a good colleague. To conclude, we want to highlight how important we think this topic is and how to work towards becoming a more confident speaker in your everyday life.
We know that the transition from college to a professional life can be really scary and nerve-wracking, and we totally get that, but speaking can really help lighten the way. Although we're going into different careers, as Willow said, we've noticed that we both have to use this public speaking every day in both of our different past professional experiences, and through talking through other friends, we've noticed that this is prevalent in every single career path that you might want to go into. But we know that, once again, this is scary, so speaking can start small. You can start by small talking the kid who sits next to you in lecture that you never look at, and ask them how their day is going, or even go up to your professor for a few minutes after class and just ask that question you didn't want to ask in front of everyone. Then when you're ready for it, you can push yourself out of your comfort zone and work on an elevator pitch and really go into a networking event and try your best. If you fail, oh well, there's more opportunities. But it's really about establishing that confidence in yourself. Because at the end of the day, it's just about feeling more confident and comfortable in your ability to connect with people through all stages of life, and the Speaking Fellows are here to help you with that.
Alright, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
So while our next speakers are getting ready and getting set up, I wanted to take a minute to talk to you guys a little bit about the Speaking Fellows, who we are, and what we do on campus. So the Speaking Fellows are undergraduate tutors who are trained in public speaking. So we can offer advice and help on things like presentations or speeches for class or for anything else, for practicing for interviews, and like how Sarina and Willow were talking about, with things like networking, practicing elevator pitches, or even professional conversations for networking. So these are all things that you can come in and visit the Speaking Fellows for, and our office is located right over there. It's the Writing, Speaking, Argument program, and you can just sign up for an appointment online at writing.rochester.edu, or you can stop by in person and check it out. We can also do workshops with different departments or organizations around campus, and those can be requested as well. So those are the Speaking Fellows, and next up we have Lillian and Hannah, who are setting up their microphones, but I'll tell you about them while we're waiting. So Lillian is a senior, class of 2025, majoring in BCS and linguistics, and Hannah is a junior and majoring in clinical and translational sciences. So we'll give them a minute to get set up, but in the meantime, thank you for being here.
I have a fun fact, Mrs. Sarah.
So the Kohn Lectures are named after Miriam Kohn, who was our first Speaking Fellow president years ago. And we have a very active Speaking Fellow alumni group chat. So I sent them a picture saying, like, look at the turnout for the Kohn Lecture tonight. Isn't this exciting? And Miriam said, oh, it's pretty apt that you're having the Kohn Lecture on my birthday. And she's turning 30 today. So it's pretty exciting that we're having a Kohn Lecture on Miriam's birthday. And I told her happy birthday from all.
My name is Lillian. My name is Hannah. And we will be presenting on how to lose an audience in 10 seconds. If this sounds a little bit familiar or the poster looks really familiar, that's because we were basing it on the movie How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. This is a fabulous rom-com and you should all go and watch it on, I think, Paramount Plus. But for those of you who haven't seen it, the general gist is that Kate Hudson writes for a magazine in a how-to column, and she is spending 10 days making all the common mistakes people make in relationships so that she can teach her readers how to avoid them. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to go through all the common ways that people lose their audience when they're presenting or speaking, and hopefully teach you how to avoid them. So before we get started, we want to do a little bit of an activity with you guys. You've all seen people public speak before, whether it be at another Kohn lecture or even just in your class listening to your professor talk. What is something something that a professor has done or another public speaker that really makes it hard for you to stay focused or pay attention in class? Yeah.
I've had professors that have been writing on the chalkboard and also speaking at the same time. So they're speaking at the chalkboard and you can't hear them or even read
It's
them.
really hard.
That's really frustrating. Anybody else?
Some professors get sidetracked, which makes it hard to not get distracted right on the computer and just look at a different website.
Yeah, definitely. Do one more.
When public speakers have dramatic tonation throughout the whole entire presentation, so then I kind of get distracted on the tone and I don't look at anything else.
Yeah, that's a wonderful tip.
That's awesome. So we kind of broke down our different problems in how to lose an audience in like 10 days, as maybe if you've seen the movie. And so the first day is monotone voice. So I feel like this is like the most typically seen one. Typically you'll think of like a professor that's like talking everything in one tone and just like, I just love falling back asleep at 8 a.m. It's just amazing. But also what Juliana said, also like too much emphasis on every single word. Like I don't know what to listen to, like everything is important. And so that can be really problematic because you're just paying attention to what things they're saying. You're listening to the sounds, you're not listening to the words, you're not getting what they're trying to say. And so a solution for having a monotone voice is adding dynamic tone and structure to your sentences, putting more emphasis on one word rather than others so that you know what your audience needs to know. Another problem is having distracting body language. So I had one professor that used to be walking in a jazz square for the entire hour and 20-minute long lecture. I don't know if some of you have taken this course, but that was very eye-opening. So typically we see like distracting body language is like flailing arms. Maybe you're scratching somewhere that you shouldn't be scratching. Or you're picking at something. And the problem with distracting body language is that your audience is going to start seeing your body language and not listening to anything that you're saying. They're just going to be staring at where you're itching. And so a way to combat this problem is adding intentional movements. So this could be like using your hands to emphasize what you're saying. If you're listing things off, list them off with your fingers. You could also ask a friend and practice on your friend and ask them, is anything that I'm doing distracting to you? Or is like, what are the things that you notice about my presenting? You can also use redirection if you're seeing yourself making these little like small movements that could be distracting to your audience. You could redirect by holding like a remote or something, an object, so you're not moving around too much. On the flip side, another problem we see is having closed off body language or lack of body movement. If I have my arms crossed and my shoulders are kind of forward, it kind of shows my audience that I don't really care what I'm talking about, and why should you? And so another way to combat this is having open body language. Having open body language is like a subconscious way of communicating with your audience that you care about what you're talking about, that I'm interested and you should be interested too. And so that's seen as like open shoulders, maybe having a pleasant smile on my face, maybe arms down by my sides or in the happy pyramid, as some people call it. And another way I like to think about body language is kind of like attraction. What I mean by this is, you probably have seen this meme before. And so let's kind of talk about how their body language is like showing how body language impacts other people, like your audience. So the person in the back, in the blue shirt, shoulders kind of hunched forward. I guess you could say like kind of like a disdained look on her face. While the person in red, smile on her face, shoulders back. And who is the guy attracted to?
The girl in the red.
The girl in the red. And so the same can be said about your audience. Your audience is going to want to watch or look at something that is like opening, that looks interesting. And so this, I just described their body language, and I guess that's a fun metaphor. For day 4, I have text-heavy slides. I feel like we've all seen presentations with text-heavy slides. And the problem with using text-heavy slides is that your audience is going to try and read every single word on your slide because they're going to think everything on there is important. And I don't know about you, but I'm not really a multitasker. I can only read at it, I can only listen at one time. So if your audience is reading your slides, they're not listening to a single word that you're saying. So to fix this, try and be concise. Try and keep only what you really, really need on your slides. For example, on our presentations, we have
we have some words on our slides, however, we're talking a lot more than what's actually on our slides. Also, you can use visuals, you can use pictures like we used in the meme for the last photo. Those are all great strategies to combat text-heavy slides. For day 5, I have monotone slides, which is a little bit different. So this is a problem when you have like the same structure. You're adding like no color to your slides. Sorry, Alex. But this can be just a little boring to look at sometimes, because as humans, we like seeing visual things, we like hearing things. This is another form of stimulus. And so, although our slides have the same format for every single slide, we're using different colors. Every single slide alternates the colors, and that kind of shows to you guys, wow, we're moving on to a different topic. This is something new, and the colors are kind of fun.
Okay, moving on from delivery to a little bit more of content-based stuff. We have day 6, jumping the gun. For those of you that have seen the movie, just a few days into their relationship, Kate Hudson starts talking to Matthew McConaughey's mom, making Photoshop pictures of their future children. She really gets ahead of herself, and it leaves him really confused. The same thing happens when we're presenting. If you have a really big concept or idea or something really exciting, and you start off your presentation with that, you might leave your audience in the dust. And that's not great, because then they think this presentation isn't for them, or they just feel really confused and lost and maybe give up trying to understand what you're talking about. So there are a few ways that we can combat this. The number one solution for this is to just make an outline. Lay out all of your ideas, everything you want to talk about, and think about the order that you're putting things in. What background information do you have to provide your audience so that they can follow along with all of your big ideas and concepts? And you can also consult a friend. Talk to somebody who is maybe in your class or a little bit familiar or even not familiar with what you're talking about, and just say, hey, does this order make sense? Do you think I need to provide more background information? Just talk to someone who's a little bit less knowledgeable than you on your topic. Sometimes when we get really involved in a project, maybe we're turning a paper into a presentation, we forget what information our audience does or doesn't have. Day 7, technical language. This one is a number one mistake when we are college-educated people and maybe presenting to somebody outside of our field. If you're using fancy jargon and your audience has no idea what you're talking about, it's really easy to lose them. They're not going to be able to follow what you're saying, and they might even give up trying if they think everything is going over their heads. So a few things we can do to combat this is, number one, know your audience. You have to know whether your audience is going to understand your technical jargon or not. If you are presenting to a really well-informed audience, maybe the technical language is fine, but if not, it's really good to consult a layman. Consult somebody who doesn't know anything about your field, maybe your 5-year-old cousin, or just pretend you're talking to somebody who is a lot younger. I'm pretty sure the average education level in the US is 8th grade, so that's a good place to start if you're thinking about making sure that your audience understands what you're explaining to them. And then you have two choices. You can either use that technical language and provide definitions and educate your audience and teach them to understand your terms, or you can decide just to switch to more layman's terms and explanations instead of using all of your fancy words. Day 8 is the flip side, mansplaining your audience. If you are talking to an educated audience and you're providing all of these definitions, they might feel like you are babying them or belittling their knowledge, feel like the presentation isn't targeted at them, maybe even get frustrated or upset with you. So we don't want to do that either. Same solution as the last one, you have to know your audience. Know that your audience is going to know that language or not. And then we can use this lovely little trick. If you're not sure whether your audience will know, you can say, as you know, or as you all know, and then provide your definitions for your technical language or concepts. This way, if you have some people in your audience who don't know, you're able to provide them with that information. And if you have other people in your audience who already know this stuff, they don't feel like you are belittling their knowledge or mansplaining to them, and they're like, yes, I do know that, you're right. And they won't get as mad at you. For example, if I was presenting something I will be presenting later this semester, a presentation on Deixis and ASL to a linguistics audience, unlike you guys, they would know what Deixis is. It's a very complicated linguistics phenomenon that even some linguists don't really know what it is. And I wouldn't have to explain that word, but I would have to explain some of the ways that it connects to ASL and some of the complicated features of ASL as a language. But if I was giving that same presentation to a group of ASL speakers, or ASL signers, or just overall people more knowledgeable in that than they are in linguistics, or I think I've said this backwards, The point is, whichever one that you're talking to, you might have that same presentation and have to provide different background information based on your audience. And if I were talking to you guys, where I know there are some people who know ASL here, I know there are some people who know linguistics, it's important that I provide both of those things, but acknowledge that some people in my audience know what these things are and some don't. So nobody feels like they're left out, and everyone feels like this presentation is targeted at them, and I want them to hear what I have to say. Day 9, disorganized delivery. We just saw a lovely example of that where I forgot where I was going with my example. This can be really distracting to your audience. If you've ever been to a class where you've paid attention the whole time, you love the professor, they're really fun and engaging, and then you walk outside and meet up with your friend, and you're like, what'd you learn in class today? You're like, actually, I have no idea what we talked about in class today, because their delivery was really engaging and it was fun, but you kept getting maybe like distracted, they kept changing their mind over what topics they were talking about, and things were kind of all over the place. There are a few ways to improve this. One is to have speaker notes, have an idea of what you're going to say, come in prepared. This is the order that I want to talk about things. This is what each slide is meant to get across to my audience. And then number 1 is to practice for this one. For all of these things, it's really good to practice and make sure that you have taken some time to really prepare what you're saying and you know where you're going with all of your points. And then my number 1, lack of purpose for day 10. You want to make sure that your audience has that key takeaway, that they know what they should be getting out of your presentation. If they only have 5 minutes of attention, what should they be remembering from what you have to say? And the easy way to do this is just to come up with your takeaway. We have a takeaway from this presentation that I have written in my lovely speaker notes because I am prepared. And I want to make sure that you guys get that information from our very long presentation. You might not remember everything we've said in these 20 minutes, but we do want you to remember that there are many common ways to lose your audience in a presentation or a speech. But these are mistakes that we make too, and there are ways to combat them. It's not a lost cause. And one way that you can make sure that you include this in your presentation is by making a very simple slide like this. Why do I care? And this way, when you have a very differently formatted slide, you get your audience's attention again, and you say, hey, this is the really important thing. If you forget everything else, remember this. And it also helps you remember to include it in your presentation. You can also phrase it, why does this matter? Or anything else similar to this to make sure that your audience has one thing that they are taking away from your presentation. They know why they came here. They have something that they can remember, even if you haven't lost your audience.
So what do you do if you've already lost your audience? Can I get a show of hands? Who dozed off for a second? Maybe? Okay, no one's admitting to it. As humans, we're naturally gonna get more bored. We kind of like don't see stimulus the same like over time. And this is called habituation, if anyone's taken ever a psych course before. And so if your audience is losing your attention, then you need to do something different. You can change your delivery through your tone of voice. You can walk around the room. You can actually add some physical movement into your speech or presentation. And you could also like maybe add a personal story. You could add something personal that your audience can connect to that's a little bit different than maybe the rest of the content that you've been saying. Also, another thing you can do is take a deep breath and step back and maybe ask your audience a question, just like we just did right there.
Yeah, and one way that you can check if you have lost your audience in a presentation is just look around the room. It's good to keep your eyes moving around your audience throughout your presentation anyways, but you can check and see if people are on their phones or if people are getting up and leaving or anything like that. That gives you a sign that maybe something about your presentation is not keeping your audience totally engaged, and then pull on one of these strategies Hannah mentioned, like adding in a question, saying, what questions do we have in the middle of your presentation so that you can get your audience back and engaged and paying attention. Thank you. Come to the Speaking Fellows. We can help you with these things. You should watch it.
If I could have Willow and Sarina come back up, we're going to do a quick Q&A session with all of our speakers. So I'll give them a minute to come down, but you guys can think of some questions that you might have.
APA. I use Chicago, but Hannah uses APA.
Okay, any questions for any of our speakers? Yes, Charles.
Alright, so Dubois Charles, the question I have is pretty simple. So most of the audiences are not like monolithic. Like here we have like speaking fellows, we have upcoming speaking fellows, we have our amazing director, boss. Okay, my point is that like most times, most audiences do have people with different levels of knowledge and with different like interests and all these things. So what's the go-to in terms of like, do you prioritize one group over the other? Do you go for a much more generalist strategy, or like what's your reasoning behind choosing either of those strategies?
I like to use that like as you know or as you all know to sort of get around that. It gives me an opportunity to provide those definitions and explanations for the people at like lesser knowledge level in the audience, while still acknowledging that a lot of the audience maybe does already know what I'm talking about. That also might be a good opportunity to, instead of using the technical language, use like alternate terms or descriptions of the language, where you're still able to talk about those like complicated topics without, as opposed to like providing definitions, just providing like equivalent terms that are a little bit simpler. Like instead of deixis, I can say like things that you're referring to that aren't physically, that aren't like nouns or verbs. That's a version of deixis that is using language that people who aren't in linguistics can understand. We all know what nouns and verbs are.
Yeah. And also kind of like adding on to Lillian's thing, I think it's really important to cater to maybe the lesser knowledge folks in the audience, just because once they're lost, once they're confused, it's hard to jump back into the content. Whereas people that have more knowledge, if they do like step away from your attention, they can more easily jump back into the topic because maybe they know more about it.
If, say you don't have a ton of time to prepare for an interview, what's like a couple of like quick strategies that you would recommend?
I think a great thing is kind of knowing your audience again, like who are you interviewing for and what are the things that they want you to know in this situation. So if you're working for, the biggest thing is honestly doing your research, because if you don't know who the company is and what they want from you, what the job specifically requires you to look for, then that's the first sign to being like, yeah, we don't want you. If you know what's in the job position and how you fit into the puzzle that they're creating, that's the most important thing you can know going into an interview. I will also add on making sure that you're nailing the questions you know they're going to ask you in the interview. Specifically, a very common opening question: tell me a little bit about yourself and why you're interested or how your experiences fit in this position. That's very easy to sort of craft up in maybe 30 minutes to an hour, and a strong first impression will have a long-lasting effect on the rest of an interview. And the second one is the classic, do you have any questions for me? If you roll up to an interview and you have no questions for them, that might give them the impression that you didn't do your research or that you're disengaged in the position.
I have a question for Willow and Sarina, because you guys talked a lot about interviews in person versus interviews on Zoom, and the sort of difficulties in presenting who you are when you're doing it online. So what would you guys say is one of the hardest things about doing interviews on Zoom or online?
I would say I've had a couple panel interviews on Zoom where it was 5 people interviewing me, and I knew that they, in the span of maybe 30 minutes, and so they all, I knew were going to ask me a question, and so really making sure that I was, trying not to be too nervous as I was entering this room of like 5 people, and making sure to limit my answers, because it was giving me, especially in one interview, it gave me a 10-minute countdown to the end of the interview, and so things like that. I would also say making sure that your Zoom is updated is a huge one. I once was late to an interview because I got a new computer and I hadn't installed Zoom with the updates, and so I was like 2 minutes late because my computer was updating. So making sure that you've made sure that all of the technical difficulties, try to minimize those as much as possible, and keeping your answers concise.
And beyond just like some of the technical difficulties and everything like that, it's really hard to not have the positive of body language on your side. You can't really do as many hand gestures, and really like your smile doesn't go as far when they can actually see you right there. So I think it kind of comes down to a lot more of how you're answering a little bit than actually your physical presence in the space. So I think that that's a little bit hard to put more pressure on your answers.
Charles?
Yeah, so the elephant in the room vibes, right? Like sometimes you are unlucky, you don't vibe with the interviewer. Other times, they just like your energy. So how do you insulate yourself against, fate and like chance that like could go either way? How do you prepare and still function and excel, even if there are vibes that might be off?
I think it's best just to be confident in yourself. Like, at the end of the day, you know that you're qualified for this position, or you're pretending to be qualified for this position. And so really just asserting that onto the interviewer and kind of still giving in your form of charm in a certain way, because even if they don't necessarily love you, if you kind of break down over that and fail the complete interview, then you're not even leaving it up to any form of chance that you get the job, and in reality you're just kind of admitting defeat right there, which you never want to do.
And I think it's also important to remember that especially if you're interviewing for a job in the big girl adult world, it's more than likely that it's more than just that one in-person interviewer that has looked over your resume, that has read your cover letter. They're probably going to be discussing in a small group of maybe 3 to 5 people your skills and how the interview went. And so a good interviewer will realize that even if your 2 personalities didn't match, that you can still be a good fit in the company, even if that interview wasn't the most spectacular interpersonal engagement.
Any other questions?
When are you guys available for speaking fellow appointments? Specifically day-wise, but you specifically, each one of you.
Oh, I'm in like 10 minutes.
Tuesday night.
On Wednesday nights.
Tuesdays from 3:30 to 5:30, and we switch off every Friday from 1 to 3.
I had to look at the thing. I'm Wednesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. And you can book with us at
writing.rochester.edu.
that one!
Or just come in.
So true. Well, now you know where to go. So thanks so much for coming, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your